All right, shalom and welcome to the class tonight. So I had several people messaging me after they saw what I posted um, about meeting with the Orthodox Rabbi and trying to get to the bottom of some discrepancies that we see. And I was really excited about it. I woke up in the morning with a lot of anxiety for some reason, like the stomachs and knots. And I don't know why I was feeling all nervous and stuff because it's not like I was talking to some famous rabbi who's got the big white beard and he's 80 something years old. Nothing like that. I know the guy. I've known him from several years. He's, like an older brother to me. I mean, we're pretty, he's like a brother to me, right? And so I don't know why I was feeling that way. And I think it might have been a spiritual thing, um, building up, because what just happened with the light? I don't know what was going on, but there was something happening spiritually. And as I said before we started recording, I had to apologize at some point because I lost it with him. Um, I laugh about it now, but you know, at the time, it was my face was red. I did not receive what he said to me really well, and it wasn't that he said something bad because he started off the conversation. Um, Jonathan, you're absolutely right. You're right, and I think I have an answer, which sounded kind of good. And he said, but there is a ruling, and you may not agree with it. And I should have known I was in trouble then. And then he asked me, "What do you want to do? Do you want me to just you me to tell you what I found?" And at that point, I should have said, "No. Um, let me present my case to you, and then you can comment on that." In hindsight, that is what I should have done. Instead, I got really upset with him and frustrated with him. I reached across the table and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, and I grabbed my Bible and hit him on the head about 5 times. Said, "Get out of him, you demonic Talmudic devil!" And you know, in the name of Yeshua. And then I snapped to, and I realized that just happened in my mind. I felt like that. But that's not how it manifested. I was just about to blow my top, and I realized that he had actually come unprepared. He did exactly what I asked him to do, help me make connections with what was in the Talmud, but he didn't study anything that I've been presenting, right? He had the bullet points. We've had conversations. He had some bullet points and stuff, but I failed him in that I should have prepared him with some stuff for him to look at before we had a conversation. So I accepted the responsibility of that because it became very clear after talking with him. First of all, he he has a tremendous knowledge of the Talmud. That's not the problem. Problem is absolutely no knowledge of agriculture. And furthermore, when we scratched the surface, because that's about all we did with one topic. The other topic we had nailed down with the counting of the Omer and that the calendar had been changed at some point. I knew that was a sealed deal. He had even admitted that the counting of the Omer was a rabbinic thing. The only thing he had a problem with was Shavuot, and that's where I lost it. So, um, but like I said, he's like a brother to me and my own blood brother before he passed away. We had a lot of knockdown, drag out fights, but at the end of the day, I still love my brother. You understand? So it wasn't like it was anything indignant or out of control or anything. I was just very frustrated with him because he basically sided with the rabbi in the Talmud in his rule. So I want to touch on that because it came down to something in Deuteronomy and Deuteronomy 16, but also um, during this time, which was 200 years after the destruction of the temple. So imagine this: they've lost a lot at this time. They've lost the priesthood. They lost a second temple. And if you recall, when they lost the first temple and went to Babylon, it was within 70 years they completely had lost and forgotten the Torah. It was only when they come back in Ezra, time of Ezra, that they found the Torah in the walls, remember? And then they started coming back to Torah. This is why we see them working in the fields in Nehemiah 15 on the Sabbath, because they had no idea. They're fresh out of Babylon. What they did have with them was now the Babylonian Talmud that came with them, you see. So at the destruction of the second temple, they lost even more connection to Yah. They lost connection to the land. And eventually, at 300 point, around 350, around the time of Constantine, they eventually lost the calendar altogether. Okay, we had all that sealed down. So I started off the conversation with him the day prior, on the 3 points that I want to cover. Omer, the wrong placement of Shavuot, and the calendar. The wrong placement of Shavuot was kind of twofold, because what we see there now is this 3 weeks of mourning with the culmination of Tish B'Av. It's clearly a place where they're mourning, and it happens to be where the real Shavuot is right in the middle of that. So I knew, because the Torah commands us to be joyful in these festivals. Every single one of the festivals we're supposed to be joyful, even Yom Kippur. Okay, but I knew in Judaism that they don't mix the two, just like they don't mix milk and meat. They don't mix joy and mourning. So it occurred to me that possibly they had identified this and moved it. I now since understand that's probably not the case. It was probably they just lost it. They lost the day completely. Yeah, hid it from her, and it was because of his comment. I could, and what his explanation was from the Talmud. I immediately knew that not only did he not know about the agriculture, the rabbis in question at the time that they made their ruling had no idea what they were talking about on their interpretation of Deuteronomy 16, and ultimately um, uh, Leviticus 23. Okay, they had lost connection with it. And if you remember the last week when I showed you the video of the rabbis who had no idea that Isaiah 53 was not in the New Testament, that's just a clear example of how well they know the actual Bible. Okay, they can quote the Talmud all day long, blindfolded, and in 3 languages. But the Bible, on the other hand, or the biblical concepts, especially the agricultural concepts, is completely lost from them. And I can tell by the reaction of the ruling that the rabbi made. So that's kind of what I want to touch on today. I recognize that I probably had failed him in a sense that I didn't prepare him and I wasn't clear and explained to him what was going on with the agriculture. And then he only had 24 hours to prepare. And what he did is he found a botanist in modern times, and couldn't cite anything from him or anything like that. But the guy says that you could get nowadays in modern times you can get winter wheat in the middle of May. And so I went off on that and explained to him that winter wheat did not exist at that time. We're dealing with a specific wheat called emmer, and it is a specific time that it's planted and harvested. And we know all the statistics about this particular wheat. But that didn't seem to make any difference to him. Ultimately, what happened was, because I didn't even get to the point of recording yet, and luckily I didn't, because it wouldn't have been able to go on YouTube. First of all, it was a mess with him. And so what I did was I sent him off. I gave him some information to study. I shouldn't have said send him off. It's not disrespect. That probably sounded disrespectful. I didn't mean it that way. I gave him some information to chew on, and then we agreed to come back together for another meeting and talk about this. And so ultimately it's my fault it went like that, and it's nothing we can't recover from. Me and him have been mad at each other before, and it's not a big deal. So I thought we were going to be able to solve this thing, and we couldn't. Now, I do want to take you to the verse where we got hung up. And I will say this, when I officially got out what my argument was, he did say right before we ended it, I see what you're saying. I can see what you're saying. I need to look at this further. And so that's where we parted, and that's what he's doing. Yeah, I read that. I read the summer basket to him because my main point was it seems to me that Yah was fulfilling a prophecy from Amos, that he promised that he was going to cause them to mourn in the summertime with us. You got a basket of summer fruit, right? It's a time specific prophecy. Time specific. Somebody's unmuted. All right. Right. I read this to it, and I pointed out that Yah said he was going to turn their feast in the morning time and songs into lamentation, right? And also brought up the point that this is about the temple. The songs in the temple shall be howling. Somebody's microphone is up. Please mute. The songs of the temple shall be howlings in that day. This is when the temple was destroyed. There'll be bodies in every place, right? So I saw this as what happened historically with Titus and the destruction of the temple. This is the fulfillment of it. I will turn your feast into mourning, your songs into lamentation, right? And that's what he did in that exact timing, you guys. Both temples been destroyed. Okay. It's also where a lot of his things historically have happened to the Jews. I don't think it was you, Margie, it was somebody else. It's okay. It's muted now. So he kept saying to me, after I would explain to him the count and where we end up, it's not 50, that we go all the way to 100. He kept saying to me that was the middle of the count. And I could not, and I was like, what are you talking about? The middle? I could not understand what he was talking about. He said, it's not there, it's at first fruits. And we're talking about the wheat harvest now. Okay. And I said, yeah, the first fruits of the wheat harvest. The wheat does not look green. The first fruit of the wheat harvest, the wheat will, in fact, look like this. At 50 days, this is what the wheat looks like. And he agreed with that. He said, yes, you're absolutely right. It is like that. But I have an answer on what the rabbis decided to do. You guys want to hear it? So he admits there is some issues in the Talmud going back to about 200 years after the destruction of the temple, where they had lost it. Imagine this. There's no going to Jerusalem, and they're doing this with a priest every feast for Passover, wave sheep offering, and then coming back at Sukkot time, and then coming back at Shavuot time, and then coming back at Sukkot time. The 3 times that you have to come. They were still required to do this, but with no temple, they were in a mess. Okay, so they had to have something to do. Okay, and the fact that the rabbis, now these Tananim, or these early sages, were doing something that the priests normally would do, which would be certifying the grain and all that kind of stuff. These guys didn't know anything about the grain, and so they're trying to figure it out. They're reading, and by the way, they didn't have the benefit of the internet like we do today, where I could go in hindsight, and with the internet, go and look and find all the details of this enough to put it together. But in those days, you've been without the temple for 200 years. You've pretty much lost with things. You don't know how to do the grain, right? You walk out at 50 days, and you see the only grain to be harvested at 50 days is, in fact, the barley. And I'm going to prove that to you with the scripture in just a second. But at the same time, when you're harvesting that barley, wheat is looking like this, right? So when barley is looking like this, the wheat is looking like this, because the barley is a little bit ahead of the wheat. What happened is they had a disagreement on what grain to offer up, because they say it's just new grain. Okay. So there are some who would harvest the barley, And that would be the bread that they would make and offer it up because it stops at 50 days. And oh, by the way, we did establish and did agree that there were at least 5 ways to count to Shavuot in those times with all these Jews. 5 different ways. They were just as confused as anybody else today. Hear what I'm saying. Yah hid this day for a reason. Okay. First of all, he took away his blessing and his spirit from them. You think he's going to reveal these secrets to him? No, he gave it to who? The Gentiles, the ones that followed Yeshua, the upper room, right? So they're starving in the famine of the word of Yah, right? They have no word from Yah, so they're trying to figure it out on their own. So some were counting one way and another way and another way. They had 5 different ways to arrive to 5 different Shavuots, and according to what I'm seeing in there, they were all 5 wrong, you guys. One way was doing the barley. One way was taking wheat like this. I even proposed this to you guys a couple of weeks ago that the only way it was possible to get flour, and you can't even get fine flour doing this, but you can get flour, is by cutting this wheat early, cutting some of it early and laying it out in the sun. You can sun dry it, but it's still going to take you about a week or so to get it fully dried. And then you could grind it and make it, and you could possibly do it that way. Famine for the word. That's right. That's where they are right now. And this is why this is sealed from this to this day. They haven't seen this. So one rabbi decides, they rule on this, that, because when they were going out in Jerusalem and all around and looking at 50 days count, the wheat looks like this. They're thinking to themselves, well, we must be cutting it green and drying it out. Can you believe that? And they were given this as a first fruits offering. First of all, this is not a first fruits offering. Wheat is not harvested until it's golden, you guys. You don't harvest it early just so you can get a first fruits offering, because guess what? First fruits is supposed to be your best offering, not your worst, not trash, not going out there and trying to force the grain to do what you want it to do because you're trying to force it into a 50-day count. Remember what I've told you guys? The agriculture preserves the calendar. So they had a problem 200 years after the destruction of the temple where they were forcing the calendar because they had simply lost it. It wasn't that they realized, we screwed up at the mountain and that both temples were destroyed at the same time and the calf was at that time and then they moved the day. That was what I thought. No, they simply lost the day. And then they were trying to figure it out later and still got it wrong. Now, here's the verse that the rabbi just told you about, the one that's doing it green. Here's the verse that my friend tells me made the ruling on. It's Deuteronomy 16:9. Now, I need you to understand something. If you're trying to solve a problem, you need all the information, and you need to look at it from every which way. Okay? Sort of like this diagram. This is the absolute truth right here. We are, in fact, looking at a cylinder. But if you look at it from this direction, you will see a shadow. Notice I say shadow. You're not seeing the object. You're seeing a shadow of it, and you're seeing a shadow this way. Both are true. But at the same time, both are also false because it's not the whole truth. To put together the full picture, we need this truth and this truth. And when you put those together, you can figure out what the object is. But if you're only coming at it from over here, you will be wrong. Even though you're true, you will still be wrong. Is everybody follow what I'm trying to illustrate here? Because this rabbi at 200 years after the destruction of the temple went to one place instead of going to the foundation place. The foundation would be Leviticus 23 and then all of the other scriptures and put them all together. You can figure this out. And it says here that you're to count 7 weeks for yourself. Begin to count from the time you put the sickle to the grain. Now, in this English translation from King James, it is obscured a little bit. Next verse it says, and you shall perform the festival of weeks. So this is after you put the sickle to the grain, the standing grain, you shall perform the festival of weeks. It's very generalized here. And if you are just going off of what you're studying right here, you're not comparing and putting together all of the picture, you're going to get the wrong answer, right? Let's look at this in the Hebrew. Because this is where I finally got him to say, oh, I see what you're saying, because I was tearing this apart. And this is one of the places where I come unglued with him. It's because it's very, to me at least, it's very plain, because I understand the concept. 7 weeks you shall count to yourself from the time that you put the sickle to the grain. So we are actually harvesting something, right? We're harvesting something, because when you put a sickle to it, you're harvesting. So from the time you put the sickle to the grain, begin to count 7 weeks. What? Wait a minute. What? So you're telling me, Rabbi, that you think that they're putting the sickle to the wheat at this point and then counting 7 weeks? Is that what you're saying? And that's when Shavuot is. Shavuot is at the end of the harvest. And he was saying, no, wait a minute. Is it? And I was like, Jacob, look at it. Shavuot is not the end of the harvest. It's the beginning of the wheat harvest. And the first fruits of the wheat harvest is never when it's green like it is when it's the barley, because we're waving sheaves of, grain for the wave offering. When we get to wheat, we're waving baked bread. So that means we had to have golden grain, has to be harvested, threshed, turned into flour, and then turned into bread, and then brought and waved before Yah. You see the process? So you can't force it by doing grain that's green just so you can keep a 50-day count. You have to let it go all the way through. So this rabbi was getting hung up on when we put the sickle to the grain. Now, here's another way I want to think about it, because I tried to get him to see this. We went back to Exodus 9 during the 7th plague. The 7th plague. We're going to establish something here. All right. Verse 31, and the flax and the barley. So this is hail that is falling on these fields. And notice how we get a picture of what the grain looks like. And by the way, this grain grows the same from northern Egypt, where they were, all the way into Judea, up through Israel, and all the way up and through Turkey and Iran. Barley and emmer wheat, all of it grows in the same time in all this area, okay? So we're talking about the same grain from Egypt and Israel, okay? Let's be really clear. So this picture I'm about to show you is a fact, okay? The flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in ear and the flax was bold. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, because they were not grown up. And in some translations, it says they were still hidden. Okay. Now, what does that look like? What is in the ear and what is hidden? Hang tight. What is hidden and what is in the ear? All right. Here we go. The barley, first of all, it takes about 4.5 months to grow barley. By this time, when the hail is falling and it's in the ear, okay, we're right around this part right here, okay, right around there or here, something like that. That's where the barley is. Now the wheat, you know where it is on this chart? What the wheat looked like? Right here. This is what the wheat looked like when the barley is being smitten. Does everybody see that? Can everybody understand what I just said? Now, If the barley is smitten, when it's just now coming into the ear.
Sorry, I don't know. Okay, sorry.
Say again. What's your question, Margie?
You asked if everyone was clear. I can understand when it's hidden that the development is 10 to 15 days.
Yeah.
When it's in its ear, I don't
Mhm.
understand. What is its ear?
That's when it's coming into grain. The grain is coming into the top of the stalk. Okay, this is a biblical term, but it is still understood by agriculture people and botanists that we're talking about when the grain, this is when it's in ear, from here all the way up. This is by the time it gets here, it's very ripe. But this is when the ear starts. Do you understand now? It's when you actually get the physical grain on the stalk. Up until that point, it's basically a grass.
But
Okay.
it's still green, right? The ear?
And it's still green. That is correct.
Yep. Yeah.
That is why by the time we get to Passover, which is just a few days later, and when they're in the land, what are they doing on day 3 of it? They're waving sheaves of what? Abib. The month is called Abib because it's starting to ripen, right? That's when we get here and it starts to turn golden, right? It's still green, but it's turning golden. That's called ripening. All right. Does everybody understand that? So over here is when it's getting smitten. And mind you, there was no barley in the first Passover. So we're even worried about that until we get into the land. I'm just getting you a mental picture of where the barley is at Passover time. Does everybody understand that? The barley.
Sorry, I'm sorry. What does smitten mean? Yes, I can see the picture. What does smitten mean?
Okay, so smitten would mean like your car parked outside and a thunderstorm came up and a large amount of hail dumped on your car and dented it all the hell and back. That's called smitten. The whole field of the barley would be destroyed because the hail falling down. We're talking about ice that falls from the sky, correct? Destroying the crop. That's what it says in the text, that the crop was smitten and destroyed, but the wheat was not touched because it had not grown up. This is the stage it was right here. Does everybody understand now? So at the time of Passover, when we're doing a wave offering, it's ripening. And so we're about right here with the grain. We still got weeks to go. Okay. So at wave sheaf, it's the first fruits of the barley harvest. But at 50 days, we're celebrating people who do it incorrectly are celebrating a what? A wheat harvest. Where did we harvest the barley at? And which is going to be harvested first? Is the barley going to be harvested first, or is the wheat going to be harvested first? Because I can tell you, when they're doing the wave sheaf offering, we got about 50 days left in the wheat in the grains cycle, and the wheat is nowhere near. By the time we get here harvesting the barley, well, like I said, when you are harvesting barley that looks like this is what the wheat looks like. It's coming up next. And it's exactly 7 weeks. It's exactly 7 weeks after you harvest the barley is when and guess what? So the grain that you're putting the sickle to at the 50-day count is not wheat. It is barley, but you're counting another 7 weeks before you get to Shavuot. And it's right there in Deuteronomy 16:9. It's right there. It's just another way of saying what it says in Leviticus 23. Just another way. But it's absolutely spot on. If you look at the two, you can deduce what is going on, especially if you know about the grain. Okay, is everybody clear? In the time of the Exodus, the barley was more advanced than the wheat. It was smitten. Okay, so that means when we're in the land and we're bringing the offering, the barley is always first with a wave offering. 50 days later, we're harvesting that same barley putting the sickle to the grain, and then 7 weeks later or 50 days later, that's when the wheat is harvested. That's the argument. Now, is that true? Now, some will say, well, Jonathan, it was winter wheat in Israel. So it is possible to have, whether it's green or it's golden, it is possible to have wheat in May. Well, my answer to that was, first of all, we have evidence of what kind of wheat it was. We know specifically what kind it was. It's a spring wheat. It's called emmer, and the growth cycle of that is 4 months. Now, Yeshua indicates this when he says at around Passover time, do you not say it's still 4 months until the harvest? He's talking about the wheat harvest in that, okay? But it's also just some common sense and some simple deduction that we can come up to this. By the way, it takes about the same amount of time to grow barley, 4.5 months, and wheat, 4 months, 4.5, depending how long the grain is able to cure in the field. It's roughly the same with a 7-week period in between. Okay, they are never harvested at the same time. So we cannot confuse that and say, oh, well, they're harvesting barley and wheat at the same time. No, there is a 7-week period between the two. Okay. So I sent him off to do some more study. You guys, I just want to introduce you to the wheat, and this is well known. It's called emmer. Emmer is a hybrid species of wheat producing edible seeds that have been used for food since the ancient times. The domesticated types are triticum, turgidum. The wild plant is, the seeds have an odd covering. The sharp spikes help the seeds to become buried in the ground. The principal difference between wild and domestic forms is that it ripened seed head of the wild plant shatters and the shattered and scatters the seed to the ground, while a domesticated emmer and seed heads remain intact, thus making it easier for people to harvest the grain. Right? Along with acorn, emmer is one of the first domesticated in the Near East and was widely cultivated in the ancient world, but is now a relic in crop in mountainous regions in Europe and Asia. Emmer is one of the 3 grains called farro in Italy. Emmer is first attested in 1908 in English as a loan word from German emmer, variant of amelkorn. Like acorn, emmer is a whole wheat, meaning it has strong glooms that enclose the grains and a semi-brittle rachis. On threshing, a whole wheat spike breaks up in spikelets and required milling or pounding to release the grains from the glooms, while emmer spikelets effectively self-cultivate by propelling themselves mechanically into the soil with their awns during a period of increased humidity. During the night, the awns of the spikelet become erect and draw together in a process to push the grain into the soil. During the daytime, the humidity drops and the awns slacken back again. However, the fine silica hairs in the awns. So this thing will actually bury itself in the ground based on the humidity, you guys. It will kind of pulsate between itself as the humidity changes. Strong similarities in morphology and genetics show that wild emmer is the wild ancestor and crop wild relative of domesticated emmer. Wild emmer still grows wild in the Near East. It is a tetraploid wheat formed by hybridization of 2 diploid wild grasses, wild red einkorn and the goat grass. Botanists, this guy and that guy in the late 19th century, were the first to describe the wild emmer as native to Palestine and adjacent countries. Earlier in 1864, an Austrian botanist, that guy, collected specimens of the same wild emmer without stating where he had collected them. Although cultivated in ancient Egypt, wild emmer has not been grown for human consumption in recent history, which causes a problem in Israel, because Israel leads the world now in agricultural research, and that means in making GMO seeds and things like that. Okay, so we got to be real clear on what kind of wheat we're talking about, and the season of this, and when it is planted, when it is harvested. All right. So wild emmer, we're talking about in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, right? So we're talking about that whole area through, that goes right through there, North Egypt, through Judea and Israel, up into Turkey and into Iran is where this is. And they say 17,000 years, right? They can place it. So you can go and do some research on that. We know the type of wheat. Okay. Now, what's the growth cycle of wheat? This kind of wheat. Let's establish that right now before we look at this video I got for you. The growth cycle of this wheat, which is emmer, okay, is 100 to 120 days. That's 4 months, just like Yeshua said. We're not talking about winter wheat that takes 7 months, and you have to plant it in the autumn, and it needs snow to winterize. We're not talking about that. We are talking about this wheat right here, okay? It's the same thing with the growth cycle of barley. Barley is roughly 90 days to 120 days. So it's about the same thing. And as we can see in the chart that I showed you and in the scripture, they do not come up in a harvest at the same time. One is more advanced than the other. Barley always comes first. Okay. And then comes the wheat 7 weeks later. So here's my witness I got for you, because I'm not the only one teaching this, and I'm not the only one that sees this, you guys. All right. So this is a really good, very short video from Barbara from Lunar Sabbath, Barbara and Pete, that they did, and y'all used this as, because I was really on down on myself last night when I went to bed, and I felt defeated, because it went so bad with him that I felt bad. Felt like I wasn't a really good teacher, and y'all kind of pulled me out of that. And it's not about that. The teaching is solid, and I think people are it's a spiritual thing, first of all, and they have this veil, and it's really a stronghold where the Spirit's not letting people through this. Really, you got to fight and dig to get to the bottom of what the truth is on this. So when is Pentecost? To some, it's tonight. To others, we still got 50 days to go, you guys. Here's the proof.
Well, Shabbat Shalom. I just want to welcome everyone to the Sabbath Day conference call. This is Barbara.
You guys able to hear that?
Host today, and Brother Pete is your co-host.
So glad to have you aboard.
This is just bullet points.
Well, our title today is When is Pentecost? And when is the Feast of Shavuot? And here are a few questions. Is there a wheat harvest in the spring?
No, there is not. The only wheat harvest in Scripture is in the summer.
Well, is the pilgrimage feast in the third month mentioned in Scripture?
There is not. Only by using a corrupt counting method on a man-made solar-only calendar do we find a feast in the third month.
Well, is Pentecost one day after the seventh Sabbath?
No, 50 days. From the morrow after the seventh Sabbath, if the new moon days were included in the 7-week count, 50 to 53 days would already been counted. From the morrow after the seventh Sabbath shall ye number 50 days, just like it said.
Well, is there any new wine available in the spring?
There is none. Grapes are a summer crop. So either Peter's accusers were fools, or there really was the possibility of new wine at Pentecost.
Well, is the day of the day that Yah spoke the commandments from Sinai called Feast of Weeks in Scripture?
It is not. Notice the word spoke. When Moshe carried the stone tablets down the mountain, Aaron called that day a feast.
So when was the wheat in Scripture ready for harvest?
The 29th day of the 4th month.
And when did Moses come down from Mount Sinai with the law?
The 29th day of the 4th month.
Well, when does the 7-week and 50-day count end?
The 29th day of the 4th month.
So we're going to go through some exhibits for you to answer these questions to give proof for the answers that we gave. And these are exhibits A through E. And you can please look up all these scriptures for yourself, and all the links will be left below. So the evidence to consider, there are two parts or two counts that must be made before Pentecost can be fully counted. In addition to the 7th Sabbath complete, we need to add 50 days, not just add 1 day for a total of 50 days. Leviticus 23. Okay, Brother Pete, would you read this page?
Verses 15 through 16. And you shall count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, you shall count 50 days, and you shall offer a new meat offering unto Yahweh. In Leviticus 23, Leviticus 23, 15 through 16, in the King James is not as clear as it could be. We would be in trouble if the King James English of this passage were the only evidence for what we're presenting. Providentially, there is plenty of evidence. Some have pointed out that od or od, that's Strong's Hebrew 5704 and 5703, does not mean from the morrow after the 7th, but Hebrew 4480 does. Guess where that word is? Leviticus 23:16, even unto 57, unto the morrow, and then we have it right there, 4480, after the Sabbath, 7th Sabbath shall you number 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto the Lord. Look at what Strong's says about Hebrew 5704. Whence of space, even unto, or time, during, while, until. Leviticus 23:16 is about time, not space. So we've been applying the word in the wrong manner all along. The Hebrew actually could be translated while from the morrow, after the 7th Sabbath, shall ye number 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto Yahweh. The Benton translation is the only translation that seems to be honest with the Hebrew. Quote, you shall also count for yourselves from the day after the Sabbath that you bring the wave sheaf 7 Sabbaths. They must be complete. Then after the 7th Sabbath you shall count 50 days, when you shall present a new offering to the ever-living. That's Leviticus 23:15 through 16.
Okay. So here are some of the exhibits. Exhibit A, Leviticus 23 is the passage in question. Remember, a Sabbath complete, 1 week, is a different yardstick in time than a day. There is a 7-week count and a 50-day count. Most readers probably see 7 Sabbaths complete, or 7 weeks, and immediately think 49 days. But there are not 49 days in this segment of time. These are scriptural weeks, 6 work days ending with a Sabbath. New moon days are a third category of day. They do not count against the week. There are at least 3 new moon days in this 7-week count, for a total of 52 days. So adding 1 more day to 52 days does not equal 50. And here is a calendar. You can pause the screen and look at it. So Go ahead, Brother Pete, and read this one.
The most salient point here is that a Sabbath complete is one yardstick to measure time. A day is an entirely different yardstick. If a person is 5 feet 9 inches tall, two separate units of measure are used. You don't measure the 5 feet from my heels and then turn around and measure 9 inches from my heels too. You add the inches after the 12th inch of the 9th foot, of the 5th foot, excuse me. Pentecost also has two separate units of measure. 7 weeks are counted or completed, and then the 50 days are counted. If a person is 5 foot 9 inches, this count is 7 feet 50 inches, so to speak. There is no command in Leviticus 23 to begin the 50th day count at wave sheaf. It says to number 50 days from the morrow after the 7th Sabbath complete.
Okay, and you shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering. 7th Sabbath shall be complete, even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath shall ye number 50 days, and ye shall offer a new meat offering unto Yah. Leviticus 23, 15 through 16. So these weeks, number one, these are weeks as reckoned on Yah's calendar, not a Gregorian Roman Catholic calendar. Yah's weeks do not count new moon days. So two, if you read the context of the passage, the 50 days are numbered from the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, not from wave sheaf. So consider the following calendar. And here on the right, you'll see Yah's calendar, and you'll see man-made calendar for this year. We're in 2023 with Pentecost on a Gregorian Sunday. So this is the sample of Yah's calendar. Up here at the top, wave sheaf would be the 16th, and you agree that the 15th was the first day, the Sabbath day, the first day of unleavened bread. The 14th there was Passover. So the wave sheaf is the 16th, the morrow after the Sabbath. And so we have Sabbath complete. Here's our first week. This is our first Sabbath in the brown here. The first week, the second week. Over here in the second month, we have the third week, the fourth week, the fifth, the sixth. And then the Sabbath completed from the 7th week. This would be the morrow after here. And so the Feast of Weeks of Pentecost would be 50 days from the morrow after the 7th Sabbath. So that's when you would begin the count. So it ends up being the 29th day of the 4th month. And we have more about this, so this might be new to you. Just wait, we have more explanation. So when counting Sabbath,
I just want to say here, guys, that not to forget when you put in this the sickle to the grain that's standing, the grain that we're talking about is at the end of the 50-day count. And I just showed you in that diagram of the grain that wheat is coming in second, not first. So the very first grain that you're going to be harvesting would be the barley, which you gave the first fruits offering on 50 days before. And that is going to, end at the 50-day count. And then it says, when you put the sickle to the new grain, to the grain, that's when you mark 7 weeks to Shavuot. That's Deuteronomy 16. So, but it's very clear that we're talking about one thing and then another thing.
we only count the 6 working days plus the Sabbath. The Sabbaths here are in tan, and the new moon days are in blue. As odd as it sounds, the new moon days are never included in a 7-day week. The new moon is never called a Sabbath by name except for the seventh new moon Feast of Trumpets. The new moon was a segment of time celebrated in a similar manner as the Sabbath. They blew horns, as it says in Numbers 10, 2-3, and 10, Psalms 81:3. And there was no commerce, Exodus 20:8-11, and Amos 8:5. The new moon was a day for a set-apart convocation, Leviticus 23:3 and Ezekiel 46:1 and 3. So you will notice new moon days were not counted in the week. So, okay.
Is Feast of Weeks, Sabaoth. Here's another witness, Exhibit B. Exodus 19:1 places our starting point in the third month. Israel arrived at Sinai on the 16th, which is the first day of the week, and Moshe was immediately summoned up the mountain. Yahweh told Moshe to go back down the mountain and to tell the people to consecrate themselves, for on the third day of the week, the 18th, he would come down on the mount in a cloud. That's Exodus 19:10-11. At the set time, Yahweh comes down from Hashemim, and the 10 words, the 10 commandments, came thundering down the mount. That's Exodus 20:1-17. The people drew back in fear, so Yahweh calls Moshe up and verbally gives him the remaining part of the covenant. In Exodus 24:1-3, we find Moshe giving an oral dissertation of what he heard on the mount, and the children of Israel agreeing to the terms of the covenant. Moshe then spends that night of the 18th writing down the terms of the covenant. The next morning, the day of the 19th, Moshe rose and built an altar, offering sacrifices, and then read the terms of the covenant to the people, who once again agreed to the terms, Exodus 24:4-7. After this, Moshe is again called up Mount Sinai, where he stayed 40 days and 40 nights.
Okay, notice that in Leviticus 23, we are told to count 7 Sabbaths complete, and here we are told to count 40 days and 40 nights. And by counting 40 days and nights, we must count even the new moon days, because they are a day. However, when counting Sabbaths complete, we only count the 6 working days plus 1 Sabbath day, not the days of the rebuilding of the moon.
Now, from the 19th, the third month, count 40 days. You again end up on the 29th of the fourth month. Evidence that this particular day is a feast day. See Exodus 32:1-6. Aaron knew it was a feast day, for it was his job as high priest to proclaim the feast of Yahweh. He just celebrated it the wrong way, and Yahweh was wroth. On this same day, the day Aaron said was a feast unto Yahweh, Moshe came down the mountain with the tablets of the covenant. That's Exodus 32:7-20. Not to be lost the fact that the law was indeed delivered at Feast of Weeks, in written form, not orally, on the 6th day of the third month, as Israel did not arrive at Sinai until the 16th day of the third month. At the end of 40 days and 40 nights, Moshe received the tablets of stone. Deuteronomy 9:11. Granted, Moses broke them in a fit of rage, but the law was indeed sent down the mount to the people at Pentecost. Remember, Yahweh came upon the mount on the 18th day of the third month, well after the day presently observed as Feast of Weeks, the 6th of Sivan, which is in early June on the Roman calendar. This cannot be overlooked and should not be lightly regarded or ignored.
Okay, and then this calendar again is above, where you can look at the The first month, we have the first Sabbath complete, second, as we said before, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and then the counting of 50 days. So we have two witnesses placing Feast of Weeks on the 29th day of the fourth month on Yah's calendar, which is near the end of July on a Roman calendar. And
So if I could just use this layout right here, and where you see Abib 15, the next day we're waving the sheaf of ripening barley. It's going to mature in the field until it's golden, and it's harvested here. That's when we're putting the sickle to the standing grain. And then 7 weeks later, that's when we start the wheat harvest. That is what, now guys, I realize y'all made this thing obscured for a reason. He hid this thing to where rabbis could not figure it out. I think he meant for it to be that way. He redeemed the day that was defiled at the mountain in the upper room where 3,000 was saved and added back to the kingdom. He gave it to the Gentiles as well as giving the name, and he hid it from the Jews. Later, when the Christians came in, they merely adopted the name Pentecost and put it right here. That's what they did, folks. That's the bottom line. Y'all preserved this day and hid it. And I find it really interesting that there's no moon at this time, meaning it's a hidden moon. He literally, this is the hidden day that he is hidden and is going to reveal to his remnant in the last days. And I also believe this is when he's going to pour out his spirit again. And when it happened the first time at the real Pentecost or real Shavuot, they were all in one mind and in one accord, meaning they all knew when it was. They weren't in 5 different ways of reaching Shavuot. They weren't divided. They were in one mind and one accord. And that's where we have to get again, I believe, before this is going to happen again.
here is another chart explaining that. The 7 Sabbath complete and then counting 50 days. So why do we need wheat for Shavuot or Pentecost? Leviticus 23:15 through 17.
And ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Sabbath, from the day that ye brought the sheaf of the wave offering. 7 Sabbaths shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Sabbath, ye shall number 50 days. And ye shall offer a new meat offering unto Yahweh. Ye shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves of 2 tenth fields. They shall be of fine flour. They shall be baked with leaven. They shall be the first fruits unto Yahweh.
Okay, so we needed, going back to that screen, we needed the flour for those 2 wave loaves. So can a summer Pentecost be proven by either the historical record or the natural world? Exhibit C, historical record, C, Nehemiah 12:44. I'm reading over here on the left. There are only 3 times in the year when Israel was to bring a tithe of first fruits: unleavened bread, Feast of Weeks, and the Feast of Harvest or Tabernacles. Which feast time, excuse me, is the wheat? Which feast time is the wheat in Nehemiah in reference to? Nehemiah 13:5 and 13:12 tells us the new wine and oil was all.
Margie, yes. So, okay, so at Shavuot time, this is not unleavened bread like at Passover time. This is leavened bread. It will rise, and it's beautiful. Yeah. So you can use yeast at this festival. That's correct.
So offered at this time, which is by default the tithe of Feast of Weeks, which is the real count to Pentecost and not the Catholic or the Roman Gregorian calendar count. Because the new wine and oil are summer harvest. Nehemiah 13:15 even records that the sheaves of wheat were being brought in from the fields along with wine and grapes.
Nehemiah 12:44. And at that time, some appointed over the chambers for the treasure, for the offering, for the first fruit, for the tithe, to gather them out of the fields of the cities the portion of the law for the priests and Levites. For Judah rejoiced for the priests and for the Levites that waited. Nehemiah 13:5. And he had prepared for him a great chamber where aforetime they laid the meat offering, the frankincense, the vessels, and the tithes of corn, new wine, and the oil, which was commanded to be given to the Levites, and the singers, and the porters, and the offerings of the priests. Nehemiah 13:12. Then brought all Judah the tithes of corn, that means the crop of the year, or the crop, the main crop, and the new wine, and the oil under the treasuries. Nehemiah 13:15. In those days I saw in Judah some treading wine presses on the Sabbath, and bringing in the sheaves, and ladening asses, as also wine, grapes, and figs.
So Exhibit D. In Joel 2:15-19 and 2:24, he speaks of a time when wheat is still on the threshing floor, while new wine and new oil are in the vat. See also Haggai 1:10-11, Numbers 18:11-12. Early June, the 6th of Sivan, is still the spring of the year. The grapes and olives are summer crops, not spring. This is an issue that feast keepers and other folks who are against the creation calendar must resolve.
Which is true, you guys. Shavuot is not in the spring. It is a summer harvest. That has to be understood. And it's not just wheat. That's just one witness. The other witness, just like we see in the upper room, is the new wine. And not only that, there's oil. Okay. So all of these things are witnesses to the timing of when this feast is. And it is not at 50 days, you guys. That is barley that's being harvested at 50 days.
The natural world, it takes wheat more than 50 days to reach maturity. Now, there are some who say that wheat, spoken of for the Feast of Weeks, is sown in the fall along with the barley and matures a few weeks after the barley is harvested. And yes, this would permit a wheat harvest on or about the 6th day of the 3rd month. The problem with this theology is that there are too many witnesses placing the wheat harvest late in the 4th month. This is the type of contradiction that sets Bereans searching for answers. The answers are found in both scripture and the natural world.
Okay, so we're going to find it in two ways. Nature is one of them. There's two types of wheat, winter wheat and spring wheat. And the compelling fact that there are two types of wheat. Winter wheat is planted in late fall and takes 7 months to mature, and that's about early June.
Now we can immediately eliminate the winter wheat. First of all, winter wheat in ancient time did not exist. The only wheat we're talking about is emmer, which is a spring wheat. So we can right off the bat eliminate winter wheat. But people today will suggest that it must be winter wheat because it grows longer and it's harvested a little bit earlier. If we grow this side by side, we would literally harvest this field and then turn around and come right back and harvest because it would be back to back. Does everybody understand that? Because it's going to be buttressed together like this. Not like the barley and the wheat where there's 7 weeks in between harvests. They would literally run together if you planted winter wheat and spring wheat together. Now that's normally done in the Midwest and things like that. And it has to be snow to get your winter wheat to do right. And then this wheat is planted in the first week of spring, right? And that's how you could get two crops. But they did not do that in ancient Israel, you guys. Furthermore, there's all kinds of evidence that point out it was a 4-month process. And we know emmer wheat takes 120 days, right? So it is not winter wheat. We can put that to rest.
Spring wheat would be planted in the spring, which takes 4 months to mature. So please remember this. Which one, okay, was planted in Exodus 9 and is referred to for Feast of Weeks? We agree that maybe both types of wheat are now planted in the Middle East, but this doesn't answer the second part of the question above. There's two types of wheat, okay? And then this picture shows spring wheat, the winter wheat. Winter wheat would be planted in autumn on the left, and spring wheat would be planted in the spring on the right. So the timing of the harvest is important. It is the summer wheat harvest and not the spring harvest. A special offering is brought and 2 loaves of bread of the new crop of wheat.
Let's examine Exodus 9:18 through 35 and the plague of hail that destroyed Egypt. In verses 31-32, we find our answer. The flax was ready to harvest, and the barley was near ready. Both crops were a total loss. When sown, winter wheat very quickly sends up 4 to 6 inch blades of grass, which winters over. Then, as the days get longer and warmer, it begins to mature. The wheat was not destroyed in the plague of hail because it was not grown up. The Hebrew for this phrase means hidden or in the dark. By calculating the time between the plagues, the hail fell on or about the 10th day of Aviv. The significance of this is that the wheat in question had just been sown a short time before the plague, and had not yet germinated. It was hidden in the dark, buried in the earth.
So in other words, it is impossible that this wheat is ready to go in 50 days. And this is why you've heard me say it's impossible to get a harvest in 50 days. It's because of this right here. It's too early at 50 days. It's in the middle of its life. And you can't just force it to get a first fruits offering by going and cutting green wheat and put it in the sun. And we found another place where they were actually burning it in a fire and roasting it to get it dry so that they can make. No, you don't have to force it. That's why we are numbering these days. Yah has already told you when to do it. You don't have to force the grain to be ready. That was the answer the rabbis came up with, you guys. Forcing it. So it's the barley first, and then 7 weeks later, that's when this wheat that's hidden in the dark is ready to go.
This phrase, hidden in the dark, does not mean that the wheatgrass was dark green, not ready for harvest, and somehow survived the hail. Scripture does not permit this understanding. At the time of the barley harvest, winter wheat would already be sending up stalks. Said another way, it would be very much above the ground. If in doubt, notice that, quote, every herb of the field, end quote, was also smitten. That's Exodus 9:22-25. Strong's Concordance, Hebrew 52:12, says that the word herb means to glisten or to be green. Grass, or any tender shoot. Grass herb. If the winter wheat had not yet sent up a stalk, it was certainly in grass. If the winter wheat had not yet sent up a stalk, it was certainly in grass form, therefore would not have been destroyed by the hail. Would have been destroyed by the hail. The Torah says that the wheat was not destroyed. So what wheat was used for the Feast of Weeks? Regardless of what type is traditionally held, this wheat was indisputably spring wheat. absolutely.
Absolutely.
But don't take our word for it. Judges 15, 1-5 says that Samson not only destroyed the wheat, but the vineyards and olives as well. Feast keepers say that this took place at Feast of Weeks. There are no grapes or olives in early June, the third month on your calendar. So Acts 2, 1 and 13 says that the disciples were accused of being drunk with new wine after Pentecost was fully come. These men knew that there was new wine available. Otherwise, there would be no basis for this claim. Peter doesn't correct their agricultural assessment, but simply says that they were not drunk as supposed. There was no new wine in early June since the grapes were over a month from being ready to harvest. But there is new wine at the real Pentecost, at the time of summer harvest when the grapes are ripe.
So that's another witness, you guys. And not only do we have the wheat, but also the wine. It's the two witnesses of this whole thing. Yah always leaves us 2 or 3 witnesses, okay? So the window for a new wine is very specific. And it's almost fleeting because it happens between day 3 and 21. Okay, that's when it still has sugar in it. It's called new wine because it's sweet. After all the sugar is burned off of it, it starts to age. Okay. By the time the year comes around and we're running out of wine, that is the old wine. And now we're coming back into the new harvest and creating more wine, which will be the new wine, right? So this is a time specific harvest, right? And we can't just harvest grapes whenever we want to and make new wine. It's very specific to a time, okay?
And here are some quotes from Philo.
In fact, Benton agrees with Philo, an Israelite man who lived 2,000 years ago in the time of Christ. The solemn assembly on the occasion of the festival of the sheaf, having such great privileges, is the prelude to another festival of still greater importance. For from this day, the 15th day is reckoned, making up the sacred number of 7 sevens, with the addition of a unit as a seal to the whole. And that's in the works of Philo. You can look that reference up.
Okay, and that the 50th day would be reckoned there. So this sounds as if Pentecost is 50 days after wave sheaf, doesn't it? So let's let Philo finish.
These men assemble at the end of 7 weeks, venerating not only the simple week of 7 days, but also its multiple power, for they know it to be pure and always virgin, and it is a prelude and a kind of forefeast of the greatest feast, which is assigned to the number 50, the most holy and natural of numbers. Again, the works of Philo.
So the great or wave sheaf, greater and greatest, is the great feast spoken of. And from this passage, it is clear that at the end of 7 weeks, there was a greater feast, but the greatest was yet to come, the one assigned to the number 50. Remember that 50-day count? And so does Philo see Pentecost being 50 days from wave sheaf or 50 days from the end of the greater feast at the end of the 7-week count? So please examine this evidence for yourself. Well, Philo and Fenton agree with nature. They agree with Leviticus 23 and the Sinai account in Exodus 32. The 29th day of the 4th month is Shavuot. And Pentecost is the summer feast. It is between the spring feast and the fall feast. It is the middle feast. So surely our fathers have inherited lies. We've all been taught wrongly on a papal Gregorian calendar. That's where Christians have placed Pentecost. But we have discovered it is on the Father's lunar solar calendar. So to access more information about the feast days and Pentecost or Passover or anything about the Sabbath or the creation calendar, please go to our website, lunarsabbathday.com. So thank you for being here with us, and please like if this is a blessing to you, and please share it with your friends that love Yeshua.
So that is Barbara. If you guys want to find her, she's got a YouTube channel, Lunar Sabbath, but she's also got a Facebook group as well. When I go to the feast, that's who I'm fellowshipping with, you guys. Yeah, started. And just stop that. There we go. So, very well, at least to me, I hope it is becoming to be clear to you guys that something's definitely off on, and everything is preserved in the crops. So man has made a mess of it, and Yah allowed it to happen. I have suspicions of why he did that. He definitely obscured it, and it seems like I don't know who discovered it before myself and the handful of others that I've seen, like Barbara, teaching this in history, who has realized this. Certainly a farmer somewhere who read his Bible and understood the Hebrew part of what Shavuot is and the connection to wheat somewhere, I'm certain, probably scratched his head and walked away from the Bible because he knew it was just, he probably doubted the Bible because of that. I mean, I would, because it seems to contradict what nature is. Does that make sense? I mean, I hear stuff like that all the time from people. They won't believe the Bible because it says there were giants in the land, right? Or Noah and the flood. So I think there's an answer for everything. I thought the answer for the whole thing with the wheat, and by the way, this is what it's going to look, just so you don't forget, this is what it's going to look like when the real Shavuot comes. It's not green. And so we don't have to go out there and cut some, lay it out in the sun and dry it, or put it on a fire and roast it to get flour. We let nature take care of it because Yah has already told us to count, right? So I was kind of shocked to hear this from Jacob. And like I said, I lost my cool, but I regained my composure. And, I apologized several times to him, and we was okay. I did make light of it as I came into this class because I felt in my spirit that I could reach. We weren't even sitting across each other. I was looking at him, we're in Zoom, and it just flashed where I could just see myself grabbing him and trying to beat that Talmudic demon out of him. Because, guys, he's transitioning, just to be clear. He's only believed, how long has he believed in Yeshua? Like 4 years? 4 years or so, right? So 95% of his life he's lived as a Jew, right? And so 5% he's been pursuing Yeshua, right? So I can't hold him at fault. It's certainly my fault that I didn't prepare him for the conversation. He did come with what I asked him for, and I didn't receive it well because he really hadn't heard my whole argument yet, or any of these arguments. It could have been Barbara I gave him, or somebody else, Matthew Jensen, whoever. It's the same argument. The day is off, but he wasn't. He only knew the bullet points of it, but he really knew what the Talmud said, and he could see the argument there. And basically, that's what the Talmud is. It's going to be arguments, like what I said, between two Jews. There's about 3 opinions. So the Talmud is full of that. But there's always a ruling, okay? And so I told you what the ruling was. They were simply going out and picking green barley. And this is 200 years after the destruction of the temple, right? And it just got worse after that. Eventually we got Tishba Av, where that day was obscured even more because it's slap dab in the middle of a time of mourning for them. because they start mourning on the 17th of Tammuz all the way to the 10th of Av is 3 weeks of mourning. The real Shavuot falls right in the middle of that. So my original theory was a rabbi or some rabbi somewhere must have realized that and realized both temples were destroyed at that time, and that time right in the middle of these 3 weeks, Shavuot, is actually the day that Aaron messed up with the calf. And oh my gosh, this must be a bad time for us. We're mourning. Amos says we're going to mourn, right? He shows us the summer basket, and guess what? When it starts at Shavuot time, that's when the summer harvest starts. So when Yah is showing Amos the summer basket in Amos 8, he is talking about the feast from Shavuot to Sukkot, because Shavuot is the beginning of the wheat harvest. The end of it and the end of all of the harvest is called the festival of the ingathering, or Sukkot. There's another name for it. It's called the festival of ingathering. That means the whole harvest is over. And now, a month or so, 2 months from now, we're going to plow fields and get fields ready for planting for the next cycle, right? And it keeps going on and on and on. So, obviously, they had lost it when they lost the temple. They lost the spirit of the Most High. They could not hear God anymore. There were no more prophets. All they had was rabbis. And these guys, bless their heart, made a mess of things just like Christians did. And that's the bottom line to it, you guys. And it's the same thing with Christians. When we came out of Catholicism and became Protestants, we also took traditions of the Catholic Church with us. We could see it in every Protestant church. You see the communion, which was originated from the Eucharist, right? So both sides are guilty of man-made traditions all over the place. And the problem is, we are quickly to forget. Remember, when the first temple was destroyed, they had lost memory of everything in 70 years. It was only when somebody found the Torah hidden in the wall that they had to come back to Torah. They had lost it, you guys, in 70 years. Imagine 200 years. You follow? And the whole time the Romans is making their life a living hell. And by the way, most of them were expelled from the land. So they're trying to live as a community in all these communities, all through North Africa and all the way around to Spain, all the way around the Mediterranean. They were scattered by the Romans and still had to maintain keeping these feasts with no temple and no priest, right? And so this is how Jewish communities that eventually had rabbis that became great started popping up all through, Ukraine, Poland, Spain, Italy, even Egypt. That's where I think Maimonides, if I'm not mistaken, I may be wrong about that. I thought he may have been in Egypt at some time, but not all his life. Anyway, they were all over North Africa and all the way around to the other side to Spain, right? Scattered all over the place. And we're supposed to make these pilgrimage feasts 3 times a year. And over time, with the Talmud and new laws and new additions that came about, some of these feasts, kind of morphed into something different, right? If you look at it biblically, at all what we're supposed to do at all feasts, most of them, like Sukkot, every day of Sukkot time, in the temple time, they were sacrificing many cows every day. Every day was like 10 cows one day, the next day is 9 cows, the next day is 8 cows, the next day is 7 cows, and on down. Go look at it. It's a lot of bloodshed at that time. This is temple time. Right? Aren't you glad we don't have to do that kind of stuff anymore? I'd be so depressed. All those animals, poor animals. But Yah, he had a purpose in destroying the temple, and with Yeshua fulfilling these feasts, and then what happened in the upper room, right? He knows what he's doing. He transferred this over to you and I. And I think that's why he used a schmuck like me to figure this out, a nobody. And it's probably why my friend looks at me, my friend that's a rabbi, looks at me like I'm a scrub. Because why would Yah reveal these things to this guy? Because, I don't have an immaculate background where I spent a lot of time in seminary and all that kind of stuff like he did. All of his life, he has been, you know, in the Torah and in the Talmud, rather, and me. I got to go and ask him about things about the Talmud, but I know my Bible inside and out. And and then the fact that Yah has revealed some of these things to me, and he's not 100% on with the Shavuot thing. He's taken a look at it. The other things, the counting of the Omer and the actual calendar, which is a Hillel calendar fixed to Saturday, he knows all about that. And what the real calendar is, 8, 15, 22, 29. He knows all that. That was not the issue. It was the week. And I immediately could identify that he had not had enough time to study or review the agriculture information. Remember that diagram that I showed you? You have to have all the information to consider before you can get the full picture, you guys. I love visuals, right? So if you only got one perspective and you don't have the other perspective, you'll never figure out what the truth is. You follow what I'm saying? So he came to the table with one part. I was trying to show him what the other part was so we could get to the truth, but he hadn't studied that other part yet, right? And so therein lies the problem. And I should have been, again, I take full responsibility and also responsibility for, I lost my cool with him. Not as bad as I implied, but enough to where you could tell I was looking at myself on camera and I was red as a beet because I was steaming and I had all these things going through my mind and I could not believe it. And I stopped him at some point and I said, listen, I am not here to confirm a Talmudic rabbi in front of all of my subscribers who are following Yeshua. We are not going to confirm it. So I don't care what he says, he is wrong. And I just started going off and I started citing Bible and stuff and his excuse or his ruling that it was green grain that was laid on the ground and dried out so that they could get it at 50 days. And I said that's not an acceptable first fruits offering, in my opinion, to Yah. And we can go to Malachi 1 where Yah says something about offerings that are just they were bringing him lame animals and things like that. And he said no. And so I pointed this out to him about that. I was like, no, it's going to be golden when they bring the first fruits. To get fine flour, it has to be ripe. Does that make sense, folks? I mean, it is possible to cut green grain that's premature and lay it in the sun and force it to dry and make some rough flour out of it. And you could probably get some bread, but it's not going to be fine. It's not going to be the best. Does that make sense? Golden brown from the sun, right? You want it to dry like this, but not cut it when it's green and lay it on the ground or lay it on a rock, right? Or as some Jews would do, and there's a picture that was found where somebody found an article where they're laying it on a grate over a fire and roasting it, green wheat, just to get it dry just enough that they can make. Because remember, when it's green, you try to grind those grains up. It's a paste. It's very wet, and so you have to dry it, and so you can't force it. You let Yah do it, right? Yeah. I hope I'm not confusing. Yeah, Leanna, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell y'all, I tried to do a test bed
Yeah.
of wheat. Well, I probably followed the wrong directions.
Uh-huh.
I didn't plant it deep enough. Mostly the birds got it and none of it came up. But I live up on top of a mesa and it's cold at night.
Yeah.
So none of it has stuck its little heads out. So I'll try again next year.
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
all.
Leanne,
Yeah.
Leanne, I'm sorry to interrupt. I
That's
sent
okay.
Jonathan info on how they grow the wheat in Arizona, and it's exactly up in flag, and it was exactly what Jonathan said. Took 100 to 120 days to grow.
Yeah.
Really?
And
Okay.
yeah,
And if it's flag, I'm pretty close to the same altitude, so I'll try
Mm.
again next year, but I don't see anything coming up. What kind of wheat should I buy?
Well,
I
you
know
know,
spring.
I would do a spring one because if you try it, because the winter, unless you got snow in the right conditions, winter wheat is actually difficult to grow. You got to have the right conditions for that. And the only benefit to it is you get a jump start on the growth so that you get a little bit earlier, and it's not too much earlier. It's not going to put you in the middle of May. It'll put you at right at the last part of June, maybe. End of May is
So
pushing it still.
should I
Yeah.
plant it like at the 1st of May or like a little before May? Uh,
You could do if you want to try to do it. You can order ancient grains still. I mean, you can still get like emmer, where
okay.
yeah, you can order emmer wheat, and that's supposed to be a really good wheat. And I'm told that they make pasta out of in Italy. They love it in Italy and in Greece even to this day. Um, Turkey as well.
Cool.
Emmer wheat.
Okay.
Um,
Emmer wheat. I got
Emmer
it
wheat is a
down.
spring wheat. It takes 4 months to grow, about 120 days. And if you plant it the first week of spring, it will be ready at the end of July. Guaranteed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you do it at new moon time, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's
All right.
what see the whole thing with the moon and these crops, we cannot separate it. It is Yah made it that way, folks. It's his perfect design. And like I said about him preserving his feast and his correct count in the crops, even with GMO, you still cannot manipulate to I mean, this is the one that tells the truth. Okay. And by the way, we're not talking about GMO seeds, which I don't even know why they do that because it's not healthy for you. For most people that are intolerant to breads and stuff, it's because of that. It's because of the grains that are being used is full of GMOs, and it messes people up, right? So, but healthy grains, healthy biblical grains that are organic is supposed to be a whole lot better for you, right? So you can order GMO stuff and get it to your zone wherever you are. If you're in a cold place, there'll be a certain way that you grow it and stuff. But generally, the harvest seasons are still going to be the same. The only thing with the winter wheat is it's going to be earlier than this wheat here that we're talking about. That's like we see in the Bible, is just coming out of the ground when the barley is smitten. Okay. And it's still like that today. That's still how this grain grows, still. And so they plant it. Why the reason why it's so small is because they had just planted it like 10 days before. It was just planted. It's only had enough time to sprout a little bit of root and shoot up a little bit of a leaf. And so it could take the force of uh, um, hail falling. So you can see that picture, that little snapshot in Exodus where the barley is. It's in advanced state. We've got about 50 days to go, right? And the wheat is just coming up. So obviously that's not wheat that we're harvesting at that 50-day point. It is absolutely the barley that you're harvesting. It's what you're putting the sickle to the standing grain and then numbering 7 weeks. Okay. I don't know why Yah made it so obscured and made it like a riddle, but he did. And so unless you study the grain, you can get way off into, and this is why they had 5 different ways, you guys, with the early rabbis. I'm not even kidding you. I got a study on that. I'll show you some point where they could not agree. And they were counting because they didn't know how it worked with the grains. That's why some to this day, like Michael Brown, that video we saw where they're actually making barley bread at 50 days. Why? Because it's all it got at 50 days. That's what's golden at 50 days. And then there are some Jews that say, "Oh no, we cut it when it's green and dried out." No, you're missing that 7 weeks still to go. It's premature, and it's not the finest, right? You won't find flour. The first fruits is your best, not forcing it just because you're trying to make 50 days. That doesn't make any sense to me. But this is the logic of a second century rabbi. Okay. Oh, we'll just cut it early and dry it. Okay. write that down. And that's what they did. You know, and it's very frustrating, you guys. Very frustrating, because years later, Christianity just adopted what the Jews were doing, counting 50, and it was like, oh, Pentecost, right? It's even obscured in Acts 2, right? It doesn't say 10 days later, and it doesn't say 62 days later, which it actually was, right? It's left open-ended when it says it's fully come, as if he's not just leaving it on the surface for somebody to come along and just defile it again. You understand what I'm saying? Especially the Romans, and especially these rabbis he just kicked out, right? He hid it from them. That's my answer, you guys. I don't know why. I can suspect why and speculate, but that's the way it appears to me, that he took it from them, kicked them out of the land, destroyed his own house, and hid it. So, and by the way, they're celebrating that today. By the way, some are. Today is their Sunday. How it falls on Sunday, and it doesn't make any sense, because if you know the day every year, then why do we have to calculate it? Why does the Torah tell us to count? It seems pointless, right? The reason why we calculate it, because it has everything to do with the moon cycle. And you have to count the days from where we start. And we started previous to that, to the new year, right? Counting to Abib. And then from there at the wave sheaf, we got another count that goes. So starting with the new year, we get to Abib. From Abib and Abib 16, we go to this day. And then it continues to the full count. It's all about the grain and all about the moon and the sun, right? Has nothing to do with counting Omers and its 49 steps of enlightenment and all of that. That's completely 100% from the Kabbalah. This is what I'm talking about right here. I thought about showing you guys some of this stuff, but I really don't want to expose you to it. But there's things out there like this. This is a guy, Ephraim Kalinov, from he's local here in Miami, but he teaches Kabbalah. He is a Hasidic Jew. I'm in a community of a lot of Hasidic Jews, and they have a Kabbalah center right down the road. But this, I am telling you, counting the Omer is 100% from the Kabbalah. That was one thing I wanted to establish with my rabbi friend, and there was no dispute about that. He knows exactly where that comes from. It's a rabbinic tradition, and it has turned into something else. And it's all supposed to be all about what happened at the Mount and the destruction of the temple. So there's no dispute on that. This was what the dispute was. The actual, what the grain, what's going on with the grain. So, guys, don't take me wrong or get me wrong. I love my brother, and I meant no disrespect to him. And like I said, my own blood brother, I used to have knockdown, drag out fights with, but at the end of the day, we were still brothers, and I still loved him, right? And we got along. It's sort of like that, just not physical. So we will have another meeting after he's reviewed some things, and then come back and kind of compare, and maybe we can deduce together what possibly happened. Remember, like my theory was that possibly one of these rabbis just changed the day. And after talking with him and hearing what he had to say about the early rabbis and their rulings, I kind of think that they were just confused and did not know anything about the grain anymore, and just lost it, right? In all the confusion with the Romans. See, the Romans was giving them hell for many hundreds of years after the destruction of the temple. You understand that, right? So 70 AD, the temple's destroyed. You know, Constantine comes around in the 300s, right? And then they still had a ways to go before the Roman rule was over. Okay. So the Romans pretty much almost wiped them out and almost wiped out their culture. So they were holding on to straws, trying to keep it together. Okay. So they came up with traditions to commemorate things. That's the big thing about some of these traditions. It always has a meaning, right? For instance, in the counting of the Omer, you might have heard of a day called the Lag BaOmer. Anybody know what Lag BaOmer is? You heard that term, right? I've even seen Christians saying, "Oh, it's Lag BaOmer." You know what Lag BaOmer is? Lag BaOmer is the day that one of those rabbis was murdered, and so they mark that day in the count as Lag BaOmer. I think it might have been Akiva that they do that with. Anyway, it's to commemorate the death of a famous rabbi. Has nothing to do with Torah, but you see Christians on Facebook that think it's a religious day. It is not. It's an observance of a man that died horribly, is what it is, and nothing more. So that's exactly what Tish B'Av is as well. And the fact that the real Shavuot falls right in the middle of that, I think Yah drove them away from keeping that correctly and hid from them. So obviously they would not be celebrating a time of joy, which is that's what this festival is. It's a harvest festival. It's a joyous time. Now all the first fruits are coming in, the new wine, the new oil. We got groceries, baby, right? It's joyous at that time. So how could you mourn for like 10 days and then all of a sudden it's joy for a day and then you're mourning again the next day? That wouldn't make any sense. And so I can't find a smoking gun that somebody realized that and that's why they got the day moved. Like I said, I think it's just because they lost it. Anyway, anybody got any questions? I'm sorry for going so late, you guys. It's 10 o'clock. No questions? All right. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm reading your chat there, which I don't, if you're talking to me during I'm not paying attention to that. Somebody has to get my attention if you're telling me something in the chat. Anyway, thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight and being here. Hoping you're having a blessed time. Oh, you need to talk again?
Jonathan?
Yes. Yeah. Marty?
Barbara says it's July. According to Barbara, it is July 23rd this year, but I'm still going by July 24th, which is a new moon day. So I'm going with that.
Yeah, and I've seen that, and I'm a little different on that. I do think it's the new moon day of conjunction. It's a hidden day, and because it makes sense with it's being hidden from the Jews. It was hidden from Christians. There's a whole theme there of being, and by the way, Yah loves to hide things. Okay. And so I think he did that intentionally. And that's why you have to calculate it because it can fluctuate depending on how many new moons or that are in that count, because they are included. She might have confused you guys in her presentation, but they are included in the count, just not, in straight counting. They are considered.
She said
go ahead.
She said the Sabbath one was. She said the Sabbath one was, but that was like the only one that was included or so. That's what I got out.
Yeah. So that might be why we're a day different, but it's like that with anything. People are going to have different day, like the world's last chance is usually one day off on the Sabbath to what we have been doing.
Exactly.
And so it's all about the conjunction and how they observe it, and whether it's no moon or it's the first visible crescent. And so, but again, these are slight differences, but just enough to give us a division somewhere. I don't split hairs on it. I just have an opinion. I think it's good. We're going to do this complete count, and then I think that's a 24-hour period too, because they were waiting in the upper room. So they obviously had been waiting for a while when it finally happened. All right. Anyway, I think if we can get people, even if we observe both, 50 days and then the count, if we can get people just to understand that there's a possibility this thing is just a little further out, and maybe for 2,000 years we've been missing the appointment, and it was by design, by the way. Just maybe if he reserved it for the end time remnant and we get our ducks in a row and we get all on the same sheet of music, or in other words, like it says in Acts, they were in one mind and in one accord. Possibly, could it be that, that we would see a time where he poured out his spirit? Absolutely. That's how I see this. That eventually we'll figure things out and figure out when this appointment day is, and everybody shows up, and then wham, we all of a sudden had another supernatural experience, like the upper room. Just a theory. I don't know how this works, but it just seems logical to me that if these days are appointments and we're supposed to make them, and then obviously when something's been misaligned, we're missing appointments here and there, especially depending on how you do this, whether it's a solar lunar or a fixed day calendar, whatever the confusion is. We got to get on the same sheet of music. Yes, Marty.
Yeah, Jonathan,
Yeah.
I can't remember, but yes, I read it somewhere. On Shavuot, when we're supposed to do the 2 loaves of 100% whole wheat bread,
Yeah.
and it said about waving them, that you're supposed to wave it up, down, north, south, east, west. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I
And
thought.
I think it's
but
like, yep. It's in the 4 directions. It's just giving thanks for provision is basically what it is. Now, obviously, there's no temple, and so we're not doing it how the temple is. But I think for us that are getting this back and embracing it, I think it's good to practice something. Even this, if it's our own, he didn't command us to do that. That like I said, there's no temple, but we're finding it again. I think acknowledging it in that way and honoring him, I think there's something to it, to be honest. And I don't think it's works to try to get into heaven. That's not what it's about, or salvation. Not about that at all. It's honoring him because you love him, and these are his feasts. And there's a message in every single one of these feasts. Every single one of them. And Yeshua's fulfilling them. So he's still got trumpets, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot to go. That's the Feast of the Ingathering at the end, where we'll all be tabernacling together, which is my favorite feast. Yeah. Hopefully we can honor him, and and that's what it's about. It's not about trying to get into heaven or doing works or salvation issue. It's about honoring him and being set apart like he commanded. Um, yeah, it is a form of worship. You're absolutely right. Yeah. All right, you guys. So we'll be talking more. I'm probably going to be at around the time of when this is. I had wanted to do like a 24-hour broadcast and like hold space and like everybody being one mind and one accord wherever we are kind of thing. But I have to travel at that time because I got a niece that's getting married. And so I don't know what I'm going to do and how I'm going to work that out. So yeah. Um, I was thinking about it, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to be on the road. How can I do this on the road?" Because the internet's not always great, right? Sometimes it's iffy, and I'm definitely going into the sticks where I'm going. So the internet may not be a thing. So I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, 24-hour podcast. It would be rough, but I think it would be fun, like a marathon kind of thing. Maybe like a fundraiser to help get the software written, some kind of thing. I don't know. Um, I've had some ideas that I've been thinking about. Oh, I see. That's a direct message, Jeremy. I thought you were saying that in front of everybody.
Yeah, I didn't mean to, I forgot to switch that. Yeah, that'd be a rough go. I did that with Adam one time, and that was arduous.
Yeah, it would be
But
rough. I would be. Yeah, I was thinking about Jerry Lewis and the 24-hour marathons and stuff that he would do and raising money because I don't know how I'm going to pay for this software. It's but I'm committed and determined that we're going to get this thing. So it's not cheap. So I'm gonna at some point ask for help and probably do like a podcast 24-hour thing. Shabbat is supposed to be about giving and offering. And at that time, during a time of abundance, people kind of traded things. They would, I got some of this and they give them that. And it was a whole community kind of thing. Everybody had plenty because everybody had something that they grew, right? It was a whole community kind of thing. Community helping community. Anyway, crowdfunding this thing would be the best option to get it done. I don't know if I can carry the whole thing on my back, to be honest. I believe that Yah is able and we can do it, but it's slow going right now on getting it all up. Yeah. You think 24 hours is too many hours? People get, well, there's subscribers all the way around the world. So there would be 12 hours, you think? 12 hours is enough? That would still be a long one. Maybe 12. We'll see. Yeah. I'll have to come up with an itinerary of, making sure I can fill every moment, because it can't be just dead air, right? I'm going to have to be active on the whole thing. Maybe have some guests if I can get people to talk to me.
I could read with you or something.
Yeah.
We do some readings or some talking or something. I've been on with people before. I don't mind talking. So
very good. Yeah, we might open up the lines there. Open mic. Yeah, that would get me in trouble. You do have some trolls that come by and like to troll you and do silly things on camera, and so I got to be careful of that kind of stuff. I don't want to open myself up. Bunch of kids playing. Anyway, you guys, I've done kept you another 13 minutes. Sharing codes, we can share codes. Yep, we can do that. We can find some things to do for the whole thing. Maybe James Block music, some worship music, and just holding space, right? That's the point. And honoring Yah. Anyway, thank you guys. Let me pray us out. We'll see you over in Discord, and we'll also see you next week in class.